Well, another great Tuesday it is. Happy Tuesday. They say that um, of all the possible success in the world, how important is success in your relationship compared to the rest? And chances are it's pretty high. There was actually a recent study that showed that only 17% of participants felt, this is crazy to think about, they were in a relationship with the love of their life. And 36% said they weren't happy in their current relationship at all. That's mind blowing. However, though, it may not be who you're in your relationship with that is the problem. A new success in relationships has more to do with these personality traits than any other factor. So, for those of you guys who are joining us for the first time, I'm Tony Jalen, joined by the wonderful Danielle Jalen. Hello, Danielle.
Hello, Tony.
Now, Vito can tell you about relationships and the things that can go ups and downs, and the rowboat to the battleship to the Titanic to the cruise ship. Danielle and I for surely has some experience with this. We've been together now for going over 2 decades now, and so we've learned a few things along the way. And we're going to share 6 traits um, to have experienced new success in your relationships. And this not only applies to personal relationships. It also can apply to work relationships as well. And we're going to tell you a little bit about what those 6 are, and then we're going to go in a little more detail of it. And so if there's things that you hear that trigger some thoughts or additional comments, feel free to put that in the comment section. And we are live in the Facebook community, the Rare Leaders Facebook community, as well as Twitter and on YouTube. Just look for Rare Leaders. So the 6 that we learned is 1, that they're committed; 2, that they're respectful; 3, they communicate; 4, they practice self-care; 5, they adapt; and number 6, which may not everyone's be a fan of, they fight and forgive. Of course, I'm not talking boxing. I'm talking, I call them communication wrinkles. So let's go through the first one. They're committed. People in successful relationships know why they're there and what their expectations are. They're also committed to being there and are prepared to work through the problems and maintain reasonable expectations. Expectations. I don't know about you, Danielle, but I feel that there's times in not just in our personal relationship, but also my professional relationship where I had expectations of the other person, yet I failed to communicate those expectations. And then, of course, I'm mad. And someone asked me once, "Hey, Tony, do they know what you're expecting?" Or you just, and my comment was like, "No, well, they should know." I don't know. What are your thoughts in terms of that first one, and that people who experience new success in relationships, that they're committed as a factor, as a trait?
Yeah, I think this is a big thing, and I think if you're in a situation right now where you are mad or you're grumpy or you have expectations of something from the relationship, and you are feeling those the angst or the anxiety or the frustration, that maybe you need to take a look at yourself and see like how committed are you to that relationship, whether it be a personal relationship or a work relationship. I think sometimes we fall into where we're not happy in our job or where we're working, and it really comes down to like, how committed am I to succeed in this, and what am I going to do to have the help that I need? Like, am I expressing what my expectations are, how I need the help, or what I'm looking for as a reciprocate of that relationship?
Yeah, there's an old quote that said, "Who's more committed, the pig or the chicken?" Right? The pig just lays. I mean, the chicken just lays the egg. The pig commits himself to the breakfast, right? The bacon. And I think that's an important thing to think about. We, I said this yesterday in another place that a lot of the reasons why people quit things is not because those things are hard. They quit because they thought it was gonna be a lot easier. It's like, whoa, this is. I thought this was gonna be a lot easier than this. And we know anything when it comes to relationships, whether it be work or personal, that they're gonna test you. And I think too, in terms of what you said, is understanding why you're doing, why you're there. I think that's easy to forget because if we treat it in the end like we treated it in the beginning, will there ever be an end? Like when you get a brand new car, we're all, oh, this is a great car. We're never gonna eat in it. We're gonna always keep it clean. We're gonna take care of it, get the oil change on time, and all of a sudden, after a while, you're like, I don't have to get it washed every single week. In regards to that, so what about um, being prepared to work through the problems and maintain those reasonable expectations?
Well, I think that both parties of whatever have to be committed to working through it. And so whether it's agreeing to disagree on a subject or just sitting down and having the conversation and hearing one another out so that you can actually understand what the problem was, and then I think expectations should be of yourself, not of the other person. Because I feel like sometimes we expect obviously of others and they're not living up to those expectations, but really then that comes down to us appreciating and being grateful for the other person versus having a set expectation of what they should be living up to our standard as.
And the thing it comes down to is, like, we'll talk about this a little bit here about communication, that intentional time, because I think a lot of times the reason why we lose that motivation for commitment is that we're not doing the things to stay committed in it. The second trait of relationships that are enjoying new success is that they're respectful. It's impossible to be in a relationship where there is no mutual respect. So, what do you feel that being respectful involves?
I think being respectful comes down to the tone and the words that you're speaking to the other person. Are you speaking to them as an equal to you, or are you speaking to them that you are superior to them and that they should just be listening to you? So I think those are probably a couple of key things when it comes to showing respect in a relationship.
Yeah, and also I think in addition to that is being mindful of just if you're starting to talk down to the other person, and to if you the other person, that's where the vulnerability comes into play, right? The other person gives you that feedback. Hey, like I literally was in the grocery store. Yeah, was it Sunday? And there's a, a couple that was walking in the frozen food aisle, and she literally yelled at them in there. She goes, "That's not on my list, so we're not going to get it." And that was the tone. And you could tell he instantly looked at me like I don't know, like it was a look of like sadness, a disappointment, and then that situation that'd be an example of talking down to the other person, right? And I think too is I was told this many years ago in a relationship, whether it be personal or professional. I was talking to one of the mentors, and he said, if you treat me as well as if you treat your spouse as well as you treat me, then you probably wouldn't be having the issues that you are having. And that's a tough pill to swallow, but how often do we treat the people that are not in our home better than people in our home? And why is that?
Are you asking the question?
Yeah.
I just think it's a level of comfort and the position of being taken for granted. That we think that we are able to slide inside our home in relationship and how we're treating one another versus losing a job or losing respect of a coworker or whatever it may be in that situation.
Yeah, and that leads to the next part about the communication. Like, how can you get along if you never talk? And I can say there's been times where I'm just going, 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 and I've gotten better at learning for the different signs where I'm like, okay, Tony, you got to slow down, you got to talk, versus just needing something. You got to talk. And I think too, whether it be work, whether it be personal, that the conversations to build the conversations require more than just superficial discussion of the weather or what the kids are doing. And I think that goes back to being that respectful side. You got to be vulnerable, because how many times are there conversations you want to have but you don't have. And then all of a sudden the teapot boils over, and the other person's going, whoa, 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 like, I thought this was about me not putting the toilet seat down. Like, where did all of this come from? So when it comes to communication, what have you learned has been like the biggest mistakes in communicating and the biggest positives of communicating?
Well, I think the parts where I think when we have to have the important conversations and oh, the mood's good right now, let's not ruin it, or things are going so good right now, let's just wait until it comes up again, and we put it off instead of having the conversation, even though it's something that's on your mind right now. It's important to discuss it while it's there instead of thinking you're going to ruin the mood, because yeah, you may ruin the mood, but guess what? It still needs to get talked about. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we've learned is that just having the conversation, like we just have to have it, like whenever it is, like obviously respecting one another's time, depending on, are you in at work? Are you in a meeting? Are you, what's going on in your day? Being respectful of when you have the conversation, but just still having it and not continuing to push it under the rug and thinking that it's just going to solve itself.
And that's an important thing to remember. Whether that be at work, how many times do employees leave? I mean, I can even say this from a coaching perspective. I coach athletes. And I've had situations where the athlete will come up to me and says their coach doesn't like them. I'm like, oh, well, what makes you feel that way? Well, I just don't think they like me. Okay, did something happen? Oh, we just don't talk. Okay, well, that's the problem. Because there's no open line of communication. And, true conversation does involve active listening, a deep interest in what the other person has to say, and also a certain amount of vulnerability. If you don't open up, you can't expect them to open up. And I get it. Like, there's going to be times where it's not going to be comfortable. However, I've learned over the years that if you don't get into that uncomfortable zone now, you're going to face something a lot more uncomfortable down the road. And because some things just don't disappear. And I ask myself sometimes the question, well, is this really going to matter a year from now? Like, and then sometimes there's that little voice that says, no, you got to go ahead and needle it right now. But that's where the intentionality comes around communication. A lot of times we'll do Saturday mornings. I mean, I enjoy talking to Danielle, just to let you all know. Like, there's days I can just sit there and talk with her all day long. And I want that, but yet also at the same time is having that intentional time with one another. I think that's important too. Like scheduling time with your employees, networking partners, with your spouse. And it may sound like, wait, I heard this once. Someone once said to me, you actually schedule time to have discussions? Yeah, yeah. Are you just running like a business? I'm like, if I don't schedule it, it's not going to get done. What's your thoughts about the next trait that's helped a lot of relationships get a lot better? The practice of self-care.
I think when you're taking care of yourself, you are in a better mind space of being more available and open to those that are around you. I think if you're feeling like crap because you're eating crap and you're feeling sluggish because you're not working out, or you're binge watching movies, or you're preoccupied with other things, I think you're just not open to a relationship, like being available and present in the moment. I think that it's easy to become distracted and want to do other things then instead of focusing on what the relationship is and being present in it.
Yeah, I liken a relationship to like a garden. You gotta weed it because it's not like you plant weeds there, but weeds just happen, and you got to pull those weeds. You got to prune the bushes, otherwise it starts looking ugly, right? And with the self care too, and you mentioned it too about binge watching movies and stuff like that. So many times we get that, at least myself, we get so dialed into this kind of stuff, right? Just the food, we got to eat well. But yet, there's also the mental food that's important to consider. What are you watching? What are you listening to? Who are you listening to? because that's starting to enter your subconscious mind and it plants little weeds in there. And people go, well, everyone watches it. Well, just because everyone watches it, everyone listens to it, doesn't make it right. Remember, the goal of news, the goal of TV shows is to get you to watch for ratings. I'm not mad at them. Just last night we were at the gym and I was watching some of the news on TV. They had all these things on news is on TV. You know, in the Canada, people getting pushed down with the piece of wood, or I don't know what the heck it was all in there. I'm like, holy smokes!
But I do have to say that they were like trashing them. Like they were beating them up. You could tell by her expression on there, even though it was muted, like she was not happy with what they were doing up there.
Oh
And it was
no!
like amazing to like actually see somebody like this isn't right, like calling it what it is. And so that I was laughing because I looked at you and I was like, "Are you seeing this?"
Oh, I saw it. I'm like going, and it was on like half the TVs, some kind of news of something, and I'm like going, man, I'm lucky I got too much on my schedule to sit down and watch the news. I mean, I'll look at USA Today real quick to look at the quick little headlines, but every so often, there was a while there in January where I got caught up in like the Facebook video loop of these guys doing these first constitutional amendment audits, right? They'd go into these communities and challenge the local law enforcement of policy versus law and owning the police. And I'm not gonna lie, like I was hoping the policeman was gonna go ahead and pull me over one day. Really stupid, I know. So I can own him, right? Like, but because I was like spending so much time with that. And all of a sudden I looked at my screen time doing an audit of my weekly week. I'm like, whoa, whoa, what am I doing on that? And I looked at what was. I'm like, like they're interesting, but you gotta be mindful of it. You gotta be mindful. That's why, if you want to have self care, like I have a mission this year to read at least 2 books a month, and I have my next 6 months laid out what I'm reading each and every month, and because that way I have to get that goal completed versus neglecting other self care. And so the point I'm trying to make with this point right here is that don't allow negativity in yourself or in your work culture. Be kind to each other. If all of a sudden you start seeing people like going a little like do a timeout, right? And say, okay, what's going on? I feel like we have to have a discussion about something. Even though we don't want to have it, we need to have it. The other trait of relationships that are experiencing new success is they adapt. So, how can you get along together if you're not able to weather the bumps in the road? We've had to adapt over the years. Um, how have you seen the ability to adapt make a difference? Not only just at home, but also maybe even with Ezekiel.
I think it's important to realize that not everything's going to go your way as much as we want it to be our way. That being able to meet one another halfway and like goes back to communicating, like, this is what I'm going to need from this to be able to make this happen. Whether it's a new position for work or if, like for school, like all that stuff. I think it's very important to like understand like you're not Superman. You can't do everything, even though we like to think that we can. But being able to ask for that help when necessary.
Yeah, that's something I have had to go ahead and pivot on over the last probably 4 years. Is that I did a lot of things on my own, even though I want you along for the ride. I didn't realize how much more I needed to adapt and say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And may not I may not explain them how I need to help right away correctly, but yet it's been such a joy to be able to get your insights on different things and opinions on things and help on things that from perspectives that I didn't even consider. And this can apply also to your workplace. So many times I feel like we feel so much pressure because we're putting it all on us. Well, when you have a team around you, people go, "Well, no one's willing to help. Have you asked?" And they're like, "Well, no." Have you communicated? Back to all these things we were talking about. Well, no. Well, then, hello. There's a reason for it, and I'm guilty of this, and I get it. Um, I truly believe, though, in everyone's heart of hearts, everyone wants to help. And here's the last one: they fight and forgive. I know it might be to everyone's surprise that Danielle and I do not get along 24/7. I know you guys all may think that we do. We don't. We don't. It's
The
like
the 8 hours that we're sleeping.
it's 8 hours sleep. Yeah. You look at social media, everyone's smiling. Like I would like to one day just have a day one time when everyone goes ahead and posts their angry faces. Just because, because we all look ridiculous, anyways. At least I do. Um, but yet, when we are quote unquote disagreeing, I don't even like calling it fighting. I think you got to also set some ground rules, especially when they start getting to the personal attacks. Um, and it's important to express your own feelings without getting personal and giving voice to your frustration. So, what would be some examples of that, would you say?
Getting personal
Without getting personal.
without getting personal, I think just sticking to what's making you upset. Like, and really, I think in the end, when you are upset about something, it's the frustration that you have with yourself about not sharing sooner, that something was bothering you, or that you needed help, or that a situation was happening. So I think that it's mostly by the time you come to the end of it, it's frustration with yourself versus the other person. Um, but just sharing, like just talking about, this is what's going on, this is why I'm upset. Um, and just making the other person aware of it, because I don't think that a lot of times they even know that there was something even wrong. It's a story that you've built in your head, and now it's replaying over and over and over. And that's why I think it's important to talk about things when they're happening, or around the time when they're happening, versus waiting and waiting and waiting and having a blow up.
One I think too is like the more you keep it in, the better author you become of that story. You add more and more chapters to it. Like, oh yeah, and this, and this, and this, and this, and what's wrong is always going to be present. And it's like goes back to the phrase of what you focus on is what you're going to get. You're going to get if you don't feel someone's appreciating, you don't feel someone's doing something. Well, you're going to feed that. You're going to feed it whether you like it or not. And a lot of it just comes down to, hey, we got to talk, right? We got to talk about this. And you talk about, I think the way to do it is saying, this is the way I feel. And the thing is, too, is that you got to be able to listen to the other person when they're sharing it and to accept what they're saying versus defending yourself. And that's easier said than done, isn't it? So if you were to say to be able to fight well and forgive afterwards, right? Because we know that can make you always stronger as in your work relationships and in your personal relationships. What would you say are some things that you learned of how to do this better?
Not even though I talk about talking about it right away, not talking about it in the heat of the moment. When you're really upset, like taking a step away, going and taking a few breaths, and then coming back and addressing it so that you are not in the heat of the moment. I think is probably the biggest thing that we've been able to do is like, yeah, we don't like to have discussions and leave them for 24 hours or whatever before we go to bed. Like, it's nice to like have them discussed, because obviously, like in the past, we've never slept well. Like we've been up all night with our backs to each other, just fuming at one another instead of just talking about it and getting it figured out. It makes more sense to talk about it, address it, but yet in a timely manner of where we've had a chance to like reflect on it, what's really bothering us and how do we address it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I have done is learn how just to breathe. Is and Danielle typically knows that's an indicator that something's about on my mind. But it's important because you just bring it up also, like we don't breathe sometimes when we get upset. And the other thing I've learned, and it's amazing because I was looking at my Evernote last Thursday, Friday, when I was upset about different things. I'd actually scripted out in my Evernote, and there were some days like I got pages, and a lot of times when went back and read it, and then before I approached it, I was like, wow, like I really let that do a tailspin. I really took that a lot further. And that, but I'm glad I did it, typed it out. I got it out of me, right? Versus letting that thought stay in my head and releasing it. And there's a quote regarding forgiveness: is to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that that prisoner was you. Um, and to really understand somebody else is really truly being a human being. And I think when you truly understand people, um, it makes a difference. Like, okay, all right, am I wanting to? Is this argument so important that it's worth the cost of losing that relationship? 9 times out of 10 is not. 1 out of 10 it is. um, well, if we were to sum this up, we talked about 6 different things right here. We talked about, you know, these traits, right? They're committed, they're respectful, they communicate, they practice self-care, they adapt, they fight and forgive. What would you say all success in relationships really relies on? If you were to say if there was one thing alone that successful relationships rely on, what would you say it would be?
For me, I think that the one thing that successful relationships, falls on is, am I being the person in the relationship that I want to be reciprocated back to me?
Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Am I treating the other person the way that I'm expecting to be treated? Am I communicating the proper way that I want to be communicated to? Just really putting yourself in the position, like looking in the mirror and saying, like, in this relationship, and doesn't matter about any relationship that you're looking at, work, professional, community, in your home, are you being the person that you want others to reflect back to you?
Yeah. Point the finger at yourself versus pointing at the other person. Because I think we always have room to improve. Bob Marley said, hey, I don't mind you going in and pointing your fingers at me as long as your hands are clean. And I think if everyone listening here today can keep what Danielle said and some of the other things that we shared as tips in mind, we talked earlier about that 17%. And I believe that you'll find yourself in that lucky 17% who love and appreciate who they're with, who they get a chance to work with, and where they are. So thank you always for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday at 12:01 p.m. Again, it's March. It's a brand new topic. Be on the lookout in the Facebook group for it. And if you're not part of our Facebook group, please make sure to make a request. Just look up for Rare Leaders. Until then, I'm Tony Jalen with
Danielle Jalen.
Appreciate you guys all. Have a